This year's election is all about being informed, guys. And if you're not out there seeking the truth, you're going to get tricked.
And what we've learned is that Trump Derangement Syndrome is extremely contagious. And people who are entrenched in politics on both the left and the right don't like Trump because he represents a threat to the system, to global interests when you're talking about entrenchment and bureaucrats.
We're seeing this trend from others who are voting for Kamala Harris. I know, they're crazy. I know. The only reason they're voting for her is because she's not Donald Trump.
Why are you voting for Kamala Harris?
Because she's not Donald Trump.
They're suffering from Trump Derangement Syndrome, or TDS.
Why don't you like Trump?
You know, I'm going to be blunt. Because he lies a lot. I don't
What do you think is the biggest lie he's told?
I don't even know where to start. Like, I don't know, just about anything. Like he'll lie about like the war in Israel and Palestine right now. You know, like in Hamas and things like that. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not super informed. I'm not a poli-sci major.
I understand, which in all honesty is a very weak excuse given that they're voting for the next president. They're actually voting against Donald Trump because they don't like them, knowing that they're going to sacrifice their own wallet in the process. It makes no sense.
If you want to talk about foreign affairs and Donald Trump, he's the only U.S. president who, in recent political history, who hasn't gotten us into any more wars. We should be celebrating Trump's foreign policy achievements. So, yeah, I mean, of course, the sky is all wrong.
This brings me to a talk about CNN and how they've conducted a different kind of poll. Instead of asking older students, they've taken a different route. And guys, before we get started, just want to thank y'all so much for being here with me. Thank you for hitting the like button. Thank you for sharing these videos and subscribing to the channel. Let's get started.
What's the first word that pops into your head when you hear the name Kamala Harris?
Liar.
What's the first word that pops into your head when you hear Donald Trump?
Pure evil.
Which one do you think is more selfish?
Like selfish? Probably her.
Kamala Harris?
Yeah, because girls are a little bit dramatic sometimes. Donald Trump, he's given his life and his heart.
And we know kids can be frank. At this age, they don't really have a filter and they really do speak their minds. But there's something that we have to notice here. Harris is painted as a liar. And we know from multiple interviews that it's true. She lied on many different occasions and has changed her policy position multiple times for political reasons. Now, we can't say that Donald Trump is passing a lie detector test 100%, but he has proven his worth given his term as commander-in-chief. But I want you guys to notice the difference in what kids are saying. Instead of a liar, Trump is called evil, which kind of matches the narrative that's been created about the former president. Remember when he won last time?
If Trump wins, how about bursting into tears and screaming fuck for the next 45 minutes?
America is crying tonight. I'm not sure how much of America, but a very, very significant portion, and I mean literally crying.
Everybody is crying and so upset, and it is the end of their world.
Feels like the end of the world.
You're awake, by the way. You're not having a terrible, terrible dream. Also, you're not dead and you haven't gone to hell. This is your life now. This is our election now. This is us. This is our country.
Is there a doomsday plan?
Am I right to ask about a doomsday plan? Do you see this as a doomsday scenario?
It feels like we're trying to avoid the apocalypse and half of the country is voting for the asteroid.
And this is mainstream media reacting to Donald Trump winning. How do you think Democrats responded to it? With CNN's latest report, many of them were not happy. And it's pretty easy to see it with how their kids have responded to Trump.
Overall, the biggest finding, the children in the study were polarized, with what researchers call more extreme responses from the blue state kids than the red state kids.
Donald Trump, he did bad things. He's like Hitler.
He only wanted to be president so that he can just control everybody.
Trump is supporting January 6th now. I remember that January 6th was a bunch of Republicans believing Trump. I feel like they thought Trump was a god. People got arrested. I think one officer died afterwards. That was a big day.
The study found that these Democrat-leaning kids were about 9 times more likely to express negative emotions about Donald Trump than Republican-leaning kids were about Kamala Harris. Why might that be? Psychologist Ashley Landrum has some ideas.
So Donald Trump is a very polarizing figure. And it's very possible that the kids are reacting to their parents reacting to Donald Trump being a very different kind of political figure than what we've seen before. So do the red state kids hold as strong of attitudes? Well, not when we're talking about Kamala Harris. In part, that could be because they don't know that much about her.
I think that the parents are well aware of who Kamala Harris is. The rhetoric against Trump, though, is much more insane compared to hers. I mean, just to call and compare somebody to Hitler is absolutely terrifying. And this is coming from a child. It also goes to show the extreme sides that liberals sometimes go to. Here's what kids answered when asked about having a friend over who may not have the same political outlook as them.
The study found that Republican-leaning kids were more open to visiting a Democrat-supporting household. The Democrat-leaning kids were about 5 times more likely to say they would not want to go to a pro-Trump house.
Would they be okay with you going over to somebody's house who is really supportive of President Trump?
No.
No? And why not?
Because they know that he's not like black people, so they will not be happy to see me.
Would your family let you go over to somebody's house who's really supportive of Donald Trump?
No.
No, they wouldn't?
No.
And why not?
Because, like, my mom and dad don't like Donald Trump at all. Not a single bit.
Would you be okay going over to somebody's house whose family really likes Kamala Harris?
I think it'd be fine. It's just about the personality of the people.
All of this doesn't match the narrative that's been given to us these past few years. Violence and anger have been mostly blamed on the right, or at least we've been told that this is a problem for both parties. Remember that they talked about Donald Trump as if he was a threat to our country, a threat to democracy? And yet this study shows that liberals are much more prone to the same narrative that they instead wanted to pin on the former president. One kid even said that if he went to the house of a pro-Trump family, it's inevitable to expect an argument that would lead to a fight, which is why it's amazing that CNN played these clips in its entirety, because it definitely shows that the country is completely divided. However, right-leaning households are less likely to contribute to the divide. Is it because they're smarter? Is it because Democrats and the left are dumber? The right is instead shown to be more open to discussions and opinions, as we've just heard from these kids. Now you gotta ask, where are these kids getting these ideas from? I remember when I realized my income was stuck. No matter how hard I worked, I felt like I just kept hitting a ceiling, but then something clicked. It wasn't just about how much effort I was putting in. It was about the people that I surrounded myself with. And once I started connecting with more successful people, all of a sudden things started to change for me. So imagine being a part of a community where success is the standard, where everyone pushes each other to be better. That's exactly what the Life Pursuit Network offers. For less than $1 a day, you can surround yourself with people who will elevate your game. Don't let your current environment limit you. Hit the link in the description down below, join us, and start building your future with the right connections. But listen to how drunk on power she is from just a few years ago.
I learned, I think I was, 22 when I started that work. I learned that with the swipe of my pen, I could charge someone with the lowest level offense. And because of the swipe of my pen, that person could be arrested. They could sit in jail for at least 48 hours. They could lose time from work and their family maybe lose their job. They'd have to come out of their own pocket to help hire a lawyer. They'd lose standing in their community. All because of the swipe of my pen. Weeks later, I could dismiss the charges, but their life would forever be changed.
And I think she was remembering the story because she destroyed the life of this family. And from the looks of it, Harris was looking back on some fond memories.
But my hell was just beginning. They gave me 2 charges: failure to supervise and encourage school attendance, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. I couldn't believe it. They framed my daughter as a gang member and basically charged me with neglect. I spent the next 2 years in court fighting these charges. Kamala assigned her nastiest prosecutors to my case.
My homicide prosecutors, my gang prosecutors. And they went over there and I said, when you go over there, look really mean.
Like 10 different prosecutors. They kept pressuring me to plead guilty and spend a year in jail. But I kept refusing because I did nothing wrong. All the time, I had to spend going to court. I was struggling to care for my Shayla. I lost my job and couldn't pay rent, and we got evicted. I became homeless. We had to move into a motel.
And I ended up being in the hospital a lot during her trial. And in that hospital stay was when I had my stroke. I had a stroke about 4 or 5 days ago. And right now I'm doing pretty good. My hand is doing okay, I guess.
In 2015, after 2 years, they finally just gave up and dismissed my case.
Is this the kind of governance that our country needs? A prosecutor who doesn't even need all of the information provided before they make an arrest? I mean, it's truly heartbreaking just to see and hear these kind of stories. But we got to be informed, guys, because this is the kind of stuff that mainstream liberal media will block out. Now, to really understand what Kamala Harris is trying to hide by evading all these hard questions, we need to just kind of like look at who she is exactly. An undeniable part of what some would argue is the worst administration in U.S. history. Because see, guys, despite what the propaganda media would have you believe, it's the economy that is preventing Vice President Kamala Harris from breaking through with the American people. So no matter how much puffed positive coverage the media gives her, she just can't seem to establish a clear lead. Why? Well, one made up word: Bidenomics. More precisely, it's the impact on the economy for which Kamala Harris is partly responsible. I mean, you guys saw the clips. On the rare occasion where Kamala Harris actually allows someone from the press to publicly ask her about the economy, she gives the strangest answers. You could even call it weird if you want. During the ABC News presidential debate, David Muir asked her, when it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago? And guess what? Kamala Harris said that she was raised as a middle-class kid and gave a clumsy biographical answer which included zero policy. A few days later, during her only interview since the debate, her response to a question from anchor Brian Taff about her specific plans for the economy, it was better memorized but equally unresponsive. And yes, it was still about growing up as a middle-class kid, that she grew up in a neighborhood of folks who were very proud of their lawn. Y'all remember that line, right? Because what else would she talk about? Bidenomics? For nearly 4 years, she and Joe Biden have been claiming that Bidenomics would bring down the cost of living, invest in infrastructure, empower families, and make life better for all Americans. Well, here we are 4 years later, and it just simply hasn't happened. And hey, that's not going to stop her from making the same claims about her mystery plan on the campaign trail. Don't believe me? Just look at the numbers. Rasmussen reports found that only 20% of Americans wanted policies in general to stay the same. Nearly 3 out of 4, or 73%, do want things to change. Only 23% said economic conditions were improving. By contrast, 52% said that things were getting worse. In parallel, Scott Rasmussen, a separate polling outfit, reported that only 26% of Americans thought that the economy was excellent or good. Now, a full 74% rated the economy poor. CNN's own Abby Phillips said Harris's recent interview with the National Association of Black Journalists, the NABJ, lacked specifics, but the panelists that she had on, they were just scrambling to defend the Democratic presidential nominee.
Black journalists today at the NABJ pressed Vice President Kamala Harris on policies from guns to the war in Gaza, but many of her answers lacked specifics, and some Democrats, like Hillary Clinton, told Kara Swisher that that's perfectly fine.
I'm not sure I agreed with her when she said it, but it was interesting for her to say it because it was, I think she was talking strategically, politically, is that she doesn't have to say too much. I think probably most people agree they should say more because, as Audie Cornish of this network said, a lot of people are Kamala curious. And if you look at the statistics, I think Kirsten talked about them last night, Kristen did, that people want to know more from Kamala Harris.
This is at the heart of what voters want to know about her. She should have something that is really quick and understandable. And that wasn't really it.
She has to do 3 things. I agree. Actually, there's one other thing. Answer the question. She got the same question at the debate. And you know what else? When I went back and watched the debate again, every single policy question she got at the debate, she totally ignored and never answered it.
Well,
why is it that she believes she does not have to answer to journalists who are asking pretty basic questions of
So guys, what do you want for dinner? So I was raised as a middle-class kid, you know what I mean? Kamala Harris spent months writing one speech, and it's not even a very good one. Something your English teacher would probably have given her a D+ on as an assignment. Do you guys know the feeling? But hey, that's not gonna stop Democrats and their mainstream media allies, will it, right? In fact, former presidential candidate Hillary Clinton said Kamala Harris doesn't have to defend her policies, that it would be a double standard to do so. Yeah, crazy, right? Check this out.
She does not have to do it, Kara. I'm going to just cut to the chase. In fact, she's put out policies on her campaign website. Anybody who's truly interested can go and read about them. She referenced policies. She actually doesn't just have policies and concepts. She has, plans about what to do. I think it's it's a double standard, and it's a double standard that is partly because they are still getting to know her, but also because they're still grappling with the idea like, oh, am I really going to vote for a woman to be president and commander-in-chief?
If you are the candidate of the incumbent White House party and only a quarter of Americans think that the economy is good or improving, well, you have a huge problem. But hey, let's not talk about that, right? Instead, let's talk about Kamala Harris growing up as a middle-class kid and her favorite phrase, what can be unburdened by what has been. Because being on video saying that you would shut down fracking on your first day in office would kill more than 105,000 jobs in Western Pennsylvania. It just kind of compounds your problem. So let's not talk about that, I guess. Do you know what the strongest argument against Kamala Harris right now is? The fact that Americans go to the grocery store every day. And what happens there? Well, people are reminded every day that the Biden-Harris administration has made everything too expensive. And again, she's the current vice president of the country, arguably the second most powerful person in the United States right now. If she wants change to happen, why not just start now? Or better yet, why couldn't she have started 4 years ago? Well, I doubt that we're really going to get any kind of meaningful answers to this because it's less than 2 months away from the most important election of our lives, and Kamala Harris is nowhere to be seen. The vice president wants to be a champion of democracy that she's barely speaking to the voters that she's counting on. Since July 21st, she's given only 3 interviews and held 0 press conferences. Now, let's remember, it's the same strategy used in Joe Biden's 2020 campaign. Hide the candidate in the basement and hope correctly that the legacy media will cooperate and go easy on them. I mean, we see the same thing with Democratic VP Tim Walz with just 4 interviews and no press conferences. I mean, it's just unbelievable that their campaign thinks that they can get away with this, but apparently it can. But I guess this approach is necessary for them, especially since Kamala Harris was only placed on the ticket after Joe Biden's senility became way too severe in public for those to camouflage efforts to work any longer. But also the fact that Kamala Harris has a history of flip-flopping on key issues, something that the media often overlooks. Meanwhile, Walz is still notorious for his failure to prevent the largest COVID fraud case in the country. $25 million stolen from funds that were supposed to feed children, not to mention his handling of the Minneapolis riots following George Floyd's death. Now, to compare, the Republican candidate Donald Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance, they've done over 70 interviews and press conferences in the exact same period. J.D. Vance alone has done more than 7 times the combined total of Harris and Walz. Talk about transparency. 70 versus 3? That's a no-brainer. But let's put it this way, guys. I totally get why Harris is avoiding the spotlight. I mean, she oversaw the Biden administration's border disaster, as the borders are, allowing millions upon millions of illegal migrants into the country. At least according to Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, has contributed to rising unemployment. Harris, a longtime leftist, has also supported controversial policies from hating Israel and backing sex change surgery for ICE detainees to plenty of other woke madness. I guess her silence this campaign season does say a lot. Her team likely knows that the more voters learn about her real views, the worse it will be for her. And the same thing goes for Tim Walz. This seems to be a deliberate effort to withhold important information, preventing Americans from making an informed choice in November. And none of the so-called guardians of democracy seem to be concerned about it. So let me know if I'm making sense to you guys. Are you seeing the Kamala Harris crisis like I am? And since we talked about how mainstream media has attacked Donald Trump, let's move on to Janet Jackson. Now guys, I did a recent live stream where I covered how Janet Jackson is getting attacked by liberal mainstream media for simply voicing out her opinion. According to her, she wasn't aware that Vice President Kamala Harris was black. And Harris's own father has admitted that they probably have connections to an Irish slave owner. Make sure you watch that video next because you're not going to believe what else we cover there. But as always, appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel and sharing these videos on social media. Appreciate that, you guys. I'll see y'all next time.